Ethan's body lay still, encased in a cold stasis pod, drifting through the endless void of space. His heart barely beat, his body barely held on to life. The last thing he remembered was the explosion, blinding lights, loud crashes, and the sharp pain that followed. Then nothing. For days, weeks, maybe even longer, he had been frozen, preserved in time, far from the battlefield where his fellow soldiers fell. It was a chance at survival, a decision made by his commanders to send him into stasis when there was no hope left. They hadn't expected him to live, but they didn't have the heart to leave him behind. The stasis pod was his prison, a cold and silent chamber that held him in place. Inside, the only thing he felt was numbness, a deep cold that made everything seem distant, even his own thoughts. The world outside was a blur. He could feel nothing, hear nothing, see nothing. It was as if time had stopped altogether. But he was alive, barely. The pod sensors had kept his vitals stable, though just barely. And all the while, he drifted through space, aimlessly, till fate took an unexpected turn. On a planet far from Earth, Lyra, an alien who belonged to a civilization as old as the stars themselves, felt something stir in her. She was an ancient, leader of a dying race, her people cursed by a lost ability that no one could explain. The once-proud beings were withering away, their numbers thinning as they could no longer reproduce. Lyra knew that her people's survival depended on finding a way to heal themselves, to restore what had been lost. For centuries they had searched the stars for answers, looking for anything that could give them hope. When Lyra's scouts found the frozen pod, she didn't expect it to be a human. But there it was, a soldier, lying cold and still, the insignia of the human army barely visible on his tattered uniform. Wow. She didn't know why, but something about the pod's readings intrigued her. The pod's energy levels were unlike anything she had encountered. It was as if this human soldier, who should have been dead, was fighting against the odds to survive. Lyra didn't hesitate. She gave the order to bring the pod to her people's healing chambers. They would examine it, find out what had kept this soldier alive. There was no other choice. Her people were dying. And maybe, just maybe, this human could hold the key to saving them. When Ethan was removed from the pod, he barely seemed human anymore. His skin was pale and frozen, his heart still and silent. The alien scientists worked quickly, trying everything they could to revive him. They used advanced technology to heal his wounds, but it was slow, and there were no guarantees. Nothing seemed to help. Ethan's body remained lifeless, but Lyra refused to give up. She couldn't. She felt something, an inexplicable pull towards him. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was something deeper, something tied to the very essence of what her people had lost. She had to try. "Let me," she said quietly, her voice calm and soft. The scientists looked at her, confused. They had tried everything. But Lyra was the leader, and her authority was unquestioned. They stepped aside, allowing her to approach the soldier. Lyra extended her hand towards him. She had a gift, one that had been passed down through the generations of her people. It was the ability to channel life energy, to heal and restore what was broken. She had used it many times, but this was different. This was not just any being. This was a human, a species that had never been a part of her world. But she knew, somehow, that their fates were tied together. As her fingers brushed against his cold skin, something strange happened. Lyra's hand trembled as a wave of warmth surged through her. It wasn't just her healing energy. This felt different. The human's body, so cold and lifeless just moments ago, began to respond. Slowly but steadily, his chest rose and fell. A weak but unmistakable sign of life. Lyra gasped, pulling her hand back. For a moment, she wasn't sure if what she felt was real. But as she looked down at Ethan, she could see his skin had changed, taking on a subtle warmth. His heart, though still slow, was beating again. Lyra didn't understand it, but she couldn't deny the connection she felt in that moment. The scientists crowded around, their expressions filled with awe and confusion. "What did you do?" one of them asked. Lyra didn't know how to explain it, She only knew that somehow the human soldier had awakened something within her, something that had been dormant for far too long. She had brought him back, not through technology, but through something more powerful, something that couldn't be measured or explained. As Ethan's eyes flickered open, Lyra stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. She had revived him, but at what cost? Her people's curse had been linked to the very touch that had brought Ethan back to life. Was this the answer they had been searching for? Or was it a dangerous mistake? Lyra didn't know yet, but one thing was certain: this human was not just any soldier. He was something more. And whatever happened next, their fates were now intertwined. Ethan's mind was clouded. The first thing he saw was a strange, alien face staring down at him. He tried to move, but his body felt heavy, like it didn't belong to him. His head throbbed, and his vision blurred. Where am I?" he managed to croak, his voice weak and raspy. Lyra's expression softened, and she knelt down beside him. "You're safe," she said, her voice calm but filled with something deeper, something that Ethan couldn't quite place. "You're on my world. You've been frozen for a long time, but you're alive now." Ethan blinked, trying to make sense of her words. He didn't understand. How could he be alive? He had been on the battlefield, surrounded by enemies. Last thing he remembered was the explosion. But here he was, in some strange place, surrounded by beings he couldn't recognize. As Lyra's eyes met his, he felt it again, a strange pull, a connection he couldn't explain. It was like she was reaching out to him, her very presence stirring something deep inside of him. What was happening? Why had he been saved? Ethan didn't know, but one thing was clear: he wasn't alone anymore. And the journey ahead would change everything. Ethan's mind felt like a fog, thick and unshakable. His body had been through something unimaginable. His limbs felt stiff, and his chest still felt heavy, as if something was holding him down. He looked around, trying to make sense of where he was. The room he was in was dim, with walls that seemed to shimmer in the soft light, like nothing he had ever seen before. It wasn't a hospital. It wasn't a military base. It was something completely alien. "Where am I?" Ethan whispered, his voice rasping as he tried to sit up. Before him stood Lyra, the strange alien who had touched him. He could remember her eyes, glowing with an intensity that made him feel both comforted and confused at the same time. Her face was calm, but her gaze was filled with something deeper, a curiosity and knowing. Ethan had no idea what she was, but somehow he knew she wasn't like the enemies he had fought on the battlefield. "You're safe," she said, her voice smooth and soothing. She kneeled beside him, her movements graceful, almost like she was floating. Her skin shimmered slightly in the light, an ethereal quality that seemed impossible. Ethan's heart raced as he tried to process what was happening. He took a deep breath, feeling the air filling his lungs like a refreshing breeze. It wasn't the harsh metallic air of a spaceship or the sterile scent of a medical room. It was fresh, alive, like the air on a planet far from Earth. But nothing about this place felt familiar. His mind struggled to make sense of everything. "My name is Lyra," she continued, her voice calm. "You've been in stasis for a long time. You were dying, but I brought you back." Ethan blinked, trying to focus on her words. "Brought me back?" His throat felt tight as he spoke. "How? What do you mean? I should be dead?" Lyra nodded, her eyes softening with a hint of sadness. "I know, but you weren't. Somehow your life force, your essence was still there, hanging on. And I did what I could to save you." Ethan's chest tightened as he processed her words. He couldn't remember much, just the explosion, the fight, the pain, then nothing. He had assumed he was gone, that his life had ended on the battlefield. But now, here he was, alive. But the questions kept coming. Who was she? And why did she save him? "How did you do it?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. He wasn't sure if he wanted to know the answer, but he had to ask. "I have abilities that allow me to heal," Lyra said simply. "My people, we've been able to heal the body, the mind, the soul, though we've lost much of that power. What I did to bring you back was ... unusual. It has never been done with a human before." Ethan's mind raced. She healed him. wasn't sure what to believe. She seemed kind, but everything about this situation felt too strange to trust. He had been saved by an alien, brought back to life through methods he didn't understand. Was he just another experiment to her people? Another tool in their quest for survival? He pushed those thoughts away. For now he had to focus on one thing: surviving. He couldn't afford to be weak, not when everything was so uncertain. So what now? Ethan asked, his voice more steady now. What happens to me? Lyra stood and extended a hand to him. Now you recover. And maybe, together, we can discover what your presence means for my people. Ethan hesitated before reaching out and taking her hand. It was something about her touch, something that made him feel more alive than he had ever felt before. Her skin was warm and smooth, and as their fingers brushed, he could feel a surge of energy pass between them, almost like an unspoken connection. It wasn't just physical, it was deeper, something that made him feel both comforted and confused at the same time. What do you mean by that? Ethan asked, confused by her cryptic words. Lyra's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, Ethan could see the weight of centuries in her gaze. My people, ... we've been dying for a long time. We've lost the ability to heal ourselves too. Reproduce, to grow. We've been searching for someone to help us survive. And now, I believe we've found that answer in you. Ethan was silent. He wasn't sure what she meant, but he could see the truth in her eyes. Lyra wasn't just speaking about him as a soldier or a survivor. She saw something more, something he didn't fully understand yet. Something important. Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm just a soldier. I don't know anything about your people or how I can help you. Lyra shook her head gently. You're not just a soldier. We're different. You've survived a death no one should have come back from. I believe that your essence or energy is what we need, what we've been missing. Ethan wasn't sure what to make of her words. Is he really that special? Was there more to his survival than sheer luck? He had to admit, there was something strange about the way his body responded to her touch. He felt stronger, more alive, than he had in months. But it was all too much. I don't know if I can help, Ethan said, sitting back against the smooth surface of the alien bed. But I'm willing to try. If you can teach me what I need to know, Lyra smiled softly, the warmth in her eyes reassuring him. I believe we can, and I believe you will be the key to saving not just me, but my entire race. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew one thing. This wasn't a coincidence. There was a reason he had been saved, a reason he had been brought back to life. And as much as he was afraid of what might come next, he couldn't turn away from the chance to do something greater than just fight in a war. He was here for a purpose, and he wasn't about to let that chance slip away. Ethan spent the next few days adjusting to his new reality. The first few hours had been a blur of confusion. His body was still recovering, but there was something else, a strange energy pulsing through him, as if every cell was waking up. He felt stronger, faster, but also unsettled. Nothing in his life had prepared him for what he was experiencing now. The room Lyra had put him in wasn't anything like the barracks he was used to. The walls were smooth and had a soft glow to them, like the light from a distant star. Air was clean, rich with the scent of unknown plants. It didn't feel like a military base, but more like a place of peace, a stark contrast to the chaos he had known back on Earth. But peace didn't come easy, not for someone like Ethan. He had been trained for battle, not for rest. He had no idea how to handle the silence. Lyra came to him every day, checking on his progress, talking to him about her world and her people. She was patient with him, always explaining things as best as she could. At first, Ethan wasn't sure how much to trust her. She was an alien, different in ways he couldn't begin to understand. But there was something about her. Her voice was soothing, and there was a strength behind her calm demeanor that made him want to listen. She wasn't like any enemy he had fought, and that only made him more curious. The first time she showed him her city, Ethan was in awe. It wasn't like the cities on Earth, full of noise and movement. This place was quiet, almost serene, with buildings that seemed to blend perfectly with the land around them. The streets were lined with trees that glowed softly, casting an almost magical light. People, alien beings who looked nothing like humans, walked by, moving with purpose. Yet there was an air of sadness to them, a heaviness that Ethan couldn't ignore. "They've lost so much," Lyra explained as they walked through the city. "My people were once the most powerful in the galaxy. We controlled planets, stars, and entire systems. But over time, something happened. We lost the ability to reproduce. We've tried everything: technology, magic, everything. But we've failed." Ethan looked at her, feeling a deep sense of empathy. He didn't know what it felt like to be on the verge of extinction, but he knew what it was like to lose everything. He had lost his friends in the battle, his comrades, the people he had fought alongside for years. He knew how it felt to have the weight of a loss like that. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, unsure of what else to say. Lyra didn't answer. At first, she simply walked beside him, her gaze distant. "Believe you're the key to our survival. I don't know how or why, but I feel it. There's something in you, something different. When I touched you, ... I felt your energy. Unlike anything I've ever experienced. I think it's what we've been searching for." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't understand what she meant by energy or how he could possibly help. But the way she spoke, so certain, so hopeful, made him want to believe. He had nothing left to lose. After everything he had been through, maybe this was his chance to do something that mattered. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice steady. Lyra smiled softly, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "I need you to train, to learn what your body can do. I can help you with that. You're more than just a soldier now. You have something inside you that can help us, Ethan." The next few days were spent in intense training. Lyra taught him how to harness his newfound energy, how to focus it, how to control it. At first it was difficult. Ethan's body felt strange, almost foreign to him, as if he didn't quite belong inside it. But the more he practiced, the more he began to understand. His strength grew, and with it, his confidence. He was learning not just how to fight, but how to heal, how to connect with the energy around him. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced on Earth. One morning, Lyra took him to a training chamber, a large open space filled with light and soft glowing platforms. She had set up a series of obstacles for him: hard metal walls, strange alien devices, moving targets. "Today, I want to test you," she said, her tone serious. "You've learned the basics. Now we'll see how you handle yourself under pressure." Ethan nodded, determined to prove himself. He wasn't the best soldier on Earth, but he had survived battles that should have killed him. He was ready for this. Lyra stepped back, giving him space. "Remember, focus. Use your energy. Let it flow through you." Ethan took a deep breath, then moved forward. As he did, he felt the strange energy inside him come alive. It was a force he couldn't quite explain, but he could feel it moving through him like electricity. It moved faster than he ever had. Before his body, responding to the energy that Lyra had helped him unlock, he ducked under an obstacle, leaped over another, and dodged the moving targets with ease. It felt like the world had slowed down, like he was moving through time itself. His senses were sharper, his reflexes quicker. He was no longer just a soldier, he was something more. When the test was over, Lyra smiled at him. "You're ready," she said. "You've learned to control it. Now it's time for you to understand what you can do with that power." Ethan looked at her, feeling a sense of accomplishment. But there was still a part of him that didn't fully understand. What did she mean by power? How could he possibly help her people who seemed so different from him, so alien? Before he could ask, Lyra's expression shifted. The calmness in her eyes was replaced by something else, something darker. "There's more, Ethan. More than just training. It's more than just survival. You need to understand what's at stake." Ethan nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. He wasn't just training to fight, he was training to save an entire species. And that responsibility, that burden, was heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. Ethan's life had changed more in the past few weeks than it ever had on Earth. His training with Lyra had pushed him to the limits of his mind and body. Every day, she taught him new ways to channel the energy inside him, to use it in ways that felt foreign yet natural. It wasn't just about strength, It was about understanding himself, tapping into a power he hadn't known existed. At first, it had been difficult to control. The energy felt like a wild thing, always pulling him in different directions. But with Lyra's guidance, he had learned to focus it, to make it his own. He had learned to heal small injuries, to move faster, to sense things around him before they even happened. It was like his senses had been turned up to their highest settings. It was a power beyond anything he could have imagined on Earth. One afternoon, Lyra took him to the highest tower in her city. The view from there was breathtaking. The planet's twin suns were beginning to set, casting long shadows over the rolling hills below. Ethan could feel the wind on his face, the cool air brushing against his skin. It was peaceful here, and, for the first time, Ethan allowed himself to truly relax. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She didn't speak at first, but Ethan could sense the weight of her thoughts. "You've done well," she said finally, breaking the silence. "Your progress has been faster than I expected. Your body has adapted to the energy, and now you're more than just a soldier. You're something different, something more." Ethan looked at her, trying to understand her words. "I don't feel different," he said, his voice low. "I feel the same, but not the same. It's hard to explain. I don't even know who I am anymore." Lyra turned to face him, her expression soft but serious. "You are more than human now. Your connection to this energy is stronger than any of my people have ever had. You are the key to our survival, Ethan. But you must understand that with this power comes great responsibility." Ethan frowned, feeling the weight of her words settle heavily on his shoulders. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be the one who can save your people." Lyra's gaze softened, and she stepped closer to him. "I know, but you're here, and now you must choose. You can turn away from this, leave it behind, but in doing so, you may condemn us all. Or you can embrace it. Embrace who you are now, and help us find a way to heal." Ethan took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the distant horizon. He had always been a soldier. He had always fought for what was right, even if he didn't always understand why. But this was different. He wasn't just fighting for his life anymore. He was fighting for the survival of an entire race of beings who had once ruled the galaxy. He thought of Earth, his home, his people. What would they think of him now? Would they want him to stay and help? Or would they think he had abandoned them? The question swirled in his mind. But one thing was clear: he couldn't just walk away, not when there was so much at stake. "I don't know if I can help you," Ethan said finally, his voice steady. "But I'm not going to turn away. I'll stay and I'll learn everything I can. If I'm the one who can help you, then I'll do whatever it takes." Lyra smiled at him, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I believe in you, Ethan. And I know you'll do what's right. You have the strength, the will. All you need is to believe in yourself." The first time since his arrival, Ethan felt a spark of hope deep inside him. He had never considered himself a hero. He had been a soldier, trained to fight and survive. But maybe, just maybe, he could be more than that. Maybe he could be the one to help Lyra and her people. As the days passed, Ethan's training intensified. Pushed him harder, testing his limits in ways that felt impossible. They trained together in the vast chambers of her city, working. With the energy that now flowed through him, Lyra showed him how to focus it, how to use it to break through obstacles, both physical and mental. He learned to fight with the energy, to push it into his limbs, making his strikes faster and stronger. He learned to heal with it, to restore what was broken. But there were moments when it felt like the energy was too much, when it surged through him uncontrollably, and he thought he might lose himself to it. But Lyra was always there, guiding him, reminding him to stay grounded. She taught him that the key was balance. "There is power in control," she would say, "strength in restraint." In the quiet moments, when they weren't training or planning, Ethan began to understand Lyra more. She wasn't just the leader of her people. She was someone who had seen her world fall apart, someone who had carried the weight of her people's failure for far too long. And yet, she still believed in the possibility of hope. She still believed in something greater than herself. Their bond grew stronger each day, not just as teacher and student, but as something deeper. There were moments when Ethan would catch her looking at him, her expression unreadable, as if she was thinking about something that she couldn't put into words. It made him wonder what she truly felt for him. Was it just gratitude, or was it something else? One evening, after a long day of training, Lyra took him to the edge of the city. They stood side by side, looking out at the vast landscape below. The twin suns had set, leaving behind a sky full of stars, brighter than any Ethan had ever seen. "You've come so far," Lyra said quietly. "I never thought I would see the day when my people might have hope again. But I believe in you. Ethan, I believe in us." Ethan turned to her, feeling the weight of her words. He didn't know if he could live up to her belief in him, but one thing was certain: he couldn't let her down. Not now, not when everything depended on it. "I'll do whatever it takes, Lyra," he said, his voice firm. "Whatever it takes." Lyra smiled, her eyes soft with emotion. "Then we will win." And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was fighting for something bigger than himself. And maybe, just maybe, together they could save her people and the galaxy itself. The days seemed to blur together as Ethan trained harder, pushing his body and mind to their limits. His connection to the energy growing inside him had deepened. He was stronger now, faster, and more in tune with the strange power that had once seemed foreign. Despite all his progress, Ethan knew that he wasn't just training for his own survival anymore. He was training for something far more important. He was training to fight. Lyra had been clear with him. The peace her people once had was gone. Her civilization, though ancient and wise, was at war with an enemy far more powerful than anything they had faced before. The enemy wasn't just a single race. It was a massive coalition of alien forces that had risen to challenge Lyra's people for control of the stars. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about defending everything they had left. Ethan understood this more than anyone. The memory of the wars on Earth, of the battles that had torn apart his world, still burned in his mind. He had fought for his life, for his people, just like Lyra's race now had too. The stakes were high. The enemy, the Void Coalition, was relentless. And for the first time since he had awoken on this strange world, Ethan felt a sense of fear. Not for himself, but for Lyra and her people. One evening, as the twin suns set over the horizon, casting long shadows over the city, Lyra called Ethan to the war room. It was a stark contrast to the peaceful places they had visited before. The room was cold, full of maps and holographic displays. There were alien soldiers and strategists discussing plans, all looking at him as he entered. They were expecting him to be part of their solution, part of the plan. "We've been gathering forces, but it's not enough," Lyra explained, her voice steady. "The Void Coalition is coming, and they will not stop until they wipe us out." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He had seen war before. He had fought alongside men and women who were now gone, but this was different. The stakes were higher. The enemy wasn't just a threat to one planet or one race. They were a threat to the galaxy itself. Lyra turned to him, her eyes locking. With his, "Ethan, we need you. You've trained harder than any of us could have imagined. Your energy, it can be the difference between winning and losing, but only if we can control it." Ethan's chest tightened. He had been pushing himself to his limits, but he knew the truth now. His strength wasn't just physical. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about something deeper, something that connected him to Lyra, to her people, and to this world that had become his new home. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady. "I'll do whatever it takes to help you win this." Lyra's gaze softened, but there was no time for sentiment. "Good. The time is coming soon. We don't have the luxury of waiting." The war preparations grew more intense as each day passed. Ethan spent countless hours in the training rooms, honing his skills with weapons, learning the tactics of Lyra's people. He was no longer just a soldier. He was their weapon, their hope. He could feel the energy inside him pulsing with every movement, every strike. It was as if his very body was becoming part of the planet itself, part of the fight. But even with all the training, Ethan couldn't ignore the doubt that lingered in the back of his mind. He had never fought a war like this before. the Void Coalition was unlike any enemy he had faced. They were powerful, ruthless, and they had the numbers. He didn't know if he could defeat them, but he couldn't turn back now. He had made a choice, and it wasn't just for his survival, it was for something greater. The day of the battle arrived. The sky above the city had darkened, as if the heavens themselves were bracing for what was to come. Lyra's people had gathered in the war camps, their forces ready, but it wasn't enough. The Void Coalition had already begun their assault. The battle was fierce, and it didn't take long for Ethan to see just how deadly the enemy was. They came from all directions. Massive ships raining fire down on the city, alien soldiers flooding the ground. Ethan fought alongside Lyra's warriors, using his new abilities to strike with incredible speed and power. Every punch, every movement felt like it was part of something much larger. He was no longer fighting alone. He was fighting for a future. For a species that might not survive without him, Lyra was at his side, leading her people with the same strength that had drawn Ethan to her from the start. She was not just a leader. She was a symbol of hope, of resistance. Together, they fought against the overwhelming force of the Void Coalition, pushing back with everything they had. But despite their best efforts, the battle was not going in their favor. The enemy was too strong, their forces too vast. Ethan could feel the weight of failure creeping in, the fear that they might lose everything. It was a feeling he had known before, when the battles on Earth had seemed endless, when he had fought to protect his home and his people, but still lost. Then, in the middle of the chaos, Ethan felt it. The energy inside him flared to life, stronger than ever before. It was as if everything had come together. His training, his bond with Lyra, his will to survive, in that moment. He knew what he had to do. He turned to Lyra, his eyes locked on hers. "I can do this," he said, his voice full of determination. "I can end this." Lyra's eyes widened, but she didn't hesitate. "Do it. This is our last chance." Ethan stepped forward, focusing every ounce of energy inside him. It felt like the very ground beneath his feet was alive, pulsing with power. He called upon the force inside him, allowing it to flood through his body, through his limbs, through his soul. The energy wrapped around him like a shield, a wave of raw strength that radiated from him like a storm. In that moment, the battlefield became clear. He could see everything, every movement, every enemy, every ally. With a roar, he unleashed the energy in a massive blast, sending shockwaves through the enemy's lines. The Void Coalition soldiers faltered, their forces thrown into disarray. Lyra stood at his side, watching in awe. "You've done it," she whispered, her voice full of wonder. "You've done it, Ethan." The tide of battle began to turn. The enemy's forces began to retreat, thrown off balance by the power Ethan had unleashed. Lyra's people rallied, fighting back with renewed strength, their spirits lifted by the unexpected turn of events. But even as the enemy withdrew, Ethan knew this battle was only the beginning. There would be more wars to fight, more battles to win. But for the first time, he felt the true weight of the responsibility he had taken on. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for the future of an entire species and for a new life, a new purpose that he had never imagined. The war had left its mark on everyone. The city, once a peaceful place of hope and strength, now stood battered and scarred. But despite the destruction, Lyra's people had won. The Void Coalition, though powerful, had underestimated the resilience of Lyra's race. They had underestimated the power of hope and the strength that came from fighting for something greater than survival. Ethan stood among the ruins, looking out over the battlefield. The distant sound of rebuilding echoed through the air, but it didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like the end. It felt like the beginning. A new chapter was being written, not just for Lyra's people, but for him as well. He had become something more than a soldier, more than a man who had simply survived. He had become a symbol of what was possible when two different worlds, two different species came together. Lyra walked up beside him, her presence comforting but also heavy with the weight of everything they had lost. She had led her people through the worst of it. And now, as the war came to a close, she had to rebuild everything from the ground up. Ethan could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the same exhaustion that he felt deep in his bones. But there was also something else, something stronger than fatigue. It was determination. And it was that determination that made her the leader her people needed. You did it. Ethan, Lyra said softly, her voice full of admiration. You turned the tide of this battle. I don't know if we could have won without you. Ethan shook his head, the weight of her words heavy on his heart. It wasn't just me, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We did it together. You and me and your people. I couldn't have done it without you. Lyra smiled at him, a quiet but sincere smile that made Ethan's chest tighten. They had both come so far from where they had started. He had been frozen, in a stasis pod, drifting through space, half dead, and now here he was, standing with Lyra at the heart of a new beginning. I never thought I'd see the day when we could say we've won, Lyra said, her eyes fixed on the horizon. But now that it's here, it doesn't feel real. We've lost so much, Ethan, but we've gained something too. Hope. Ethan looked at her, his heart full of emotions he didn't quite understand. He had always thought of himself as a soldier, as someone who fought because it was his duty, but now he realized there was more to life than just surviving. There was more to living than just fighting. He had found a new purpose, a purpose he never expected, and it had brought him here to this moment with her. Lyra turned to face him, her eyes searching his as if looking for something. Ethan, there's something I need to tell you, she said, her voice steady but serious. He raised an eyebrow, wondering what it was. What's on your mind? I don't think I can do this without you, she said, her voice barely above. A whisper. I don't mean the war or rebuilding. I mean this. Us. I never expected to feel this way about anyone, not after everything that's happened. But you've changed me. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had been feeling something too, something that had been growing between them for a while. He hadn't known what it was at first, but now it was impossible to ignore. There was a bond between them, something deeper than just friendship, something more than just alliance. He had felt it when she first touched him, when she had brought him back to life, and he had felt it every day since. I feel the same way. Lyra, he said, his voice low but full of conviction. I never expected this either. But you've given me something I never thought I'd have again, a reason to keep fighting, a reason to live. For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of their words hanging between them. It wasn't just the victory that had brought them together. It was the journey, the struggles, the losses, and the moments of hope that had built the foundation of their connection. They had found something in each other that neither of them had expected, and that was more powerful than any weapon or energy they had ever wielded. Lyra stepped closer to him, her hand gently resting on his. I don't know what the future holds, she said softly, but I know I want to face it with you. Whatever happens next, we'll do it together. Ethan's chest tightened as he took a deep breath. He had never imagined a future like this, fighting. For a new world, a new life, with someone like Lyra. But now, it felt right. It felt like something worth fighting for. He squeezed her hand, his heart full of promise. I'm with you, he said, his voice strong. No matter what comes next, I'll be by your side. We'll face it together. Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time since they had met, she let down the walls she had built around herself. She leaned in slowly, her eyes closing as she reached for him. Out. And in that moment, everything else seemed to fade away. The war, the loss, the pain, all of it disappeared, leaving only the two of them. When their lips met, it wasn't just the touch of two people who had fought side by side. It was the touch of two souls that had found each other in a universe filled with uncertainty. It was a promise that no matter what came next, they would face it together, with hope and strength. When they pulled away, their foreheads rested against each other, and for a moment they didn't speak. Words weren't necessary. The bond between them was stronger than anything they could say. It was a bond built on trust, on shared experiences, and on the belief that no matter how difficult the future might be, they had each other. The galaxy had changed. Lyra's people had won, and so had humanity in a way. They had found each other against all odds. Together, they would face whatever challenges the future held, because they knew that with love and hope, they could overcome anything.